that sometimes these little interactions can be awkward, but we can survive awkwardness when what it leads to is connection. And it almost always does. So we're all kind of feeling sort of awkward about these things. We all feel a little nervous about being the one to go first. Is it going to be weird if I ask this person if they want to go for a walk or if they want to come over? Like, am I putting people on the spot? When we just take that step, we are telling our neighbors by leading with our own awkwardness that they don't have to be anything other than who they are. I'm here to promise that really beautiful and fruitful connections come from that.
Yep. I'm Jessica Vallant. I'm a physical therapist, women's health expert, and Pilates teacher, and my goal is to help all women feel strong, safe, and secure in their bodies. In this podcast, I'll share expert advice, facts, amazing guests, stories, compassion, and hope to help you meet your body in all seasons of life. I just got done talking with Shannan Martin, our guest today, and I basically can't wait to bring you this conversation. I personally first heard Shannan talk on a podcast years ago, and I went out right away and bought her book, The Ministry of Ordinary Places, which I have right here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see I'm holding the book up for you and I have it dog-eared. And this book and Shannan's voice really, really changed how I view neighborhood and community and the work that I can do in those spaces from my own home, from my own place with my feet on the ground. And I've thought of her a lot over the years in that aspect. And even more so now as she continues to talk about community. She continues to talk about something she calls counterweights in this hard time right now in the world. And so I could not think of a better voice to bring to all of us when it comes to community, when it comes to reaching out to each other and our neighbors, and when it comes to caring for ourselves during just a hard time in the world. So let me tell you a little bit about Shannan. Shannan Martin is the best-selling author of Start With Hello, The Ministry of Ordinary Places, and the popular Substack, The Soup. She is a voracious reader, a wannabe gardener, a news geek, a justice fighter, and a thrift store stalker. She and her family live as grateful neighbors in Goshen, Indiana, where Shannan is on staff at the local community kitchen. Her forthcoming book, Counterweights, an essential practice for holding hope in a heavy world, releases in spring of 2026. I am absolutely honored to bring you today this conversation with Shannan Martin. So let's start with introductions. Tell us who you are, just any part of your story you want us to know. I love stories. Like, how do you kind of see your place in the world now in this season of life that you're in?
Yeah. This question is always sort of a where do I begin and where do I end? I mean, I think what's wonderful about being a person in this world, there is a lot of complication that comes with that. But our stories are always unfolding and we are always growing and we're growing towards new things. I'm 49 now. So I just, I have a little bit of the ability to look behind me and to still continue to look ahead. So I'll just tell you sort of the nuts and bolts of it. I live in Goshen, Indiana. It's a pretty small city up by the Michigan line. My husband, Corey, we've been married for 26 years, met in college, and he is the full-time chaplain of the second largest county jail in the state of Indiana. We have 4 kids. Our oldest is grown, and out on his own. And then we have 2 in college and 1 still in high school. And yeah, I work as a cook. I'm on staff at our community kitchen in Goshen. So I spend a lot of time, sweaty and hot in an industrial kitchen, and that's become just a beautiful part of my life. My family moved here maybe 14 years ago. Our kids were really small. All of our kids came into our family through adoption. Our oldest, Robert, was not a part of our family at that time. So we had these 3 tiny little kids. And we moved to Goshen from a very, very rural context. And a lot of my story, as you know, from reading The Ministry of Ordinary Places, a lot of my story really began to reshape itself once we were living right here in the neighborhood. We've lived here, since we moved to Goshen. And my husband's career shifted at that point. A lot of our life really started to kind of meander a little bit. We started to ask different questions. We started to meet people who we hadn't met before. We were suddenly really kind of compressed here in the neighborhood with people who did not look or live or believe the same way we did. And that has a profound way of changing a person and really requiring myself to start asking the questions of why do I sort of live the way I live, believe what I believe, to really interrogate some of those questions and to just pay attention to this beautiful
Yeah.
place where we just kind of landed by good luck, I would say. So I say often my neighbors changed my life because it's one of the truest things about me. And now, we're just creeping up on the empty nest years, and this is really the only home our three youngest kids have ever known. And so it's an interesting place to be
Yep.
right here kind of in the thick of it and being excited about what the future holds and just really grateful about our story up to this point.
And and you guys, if you're watching this on video, you can see Shannan's book right here, Ministry of Ordinary Places. And I truly do think back on it often. So when it found me in my life, we had just moved into a home that we adored. I was so thankful for it. And it was very urban, teeny tiny yard,
Mhm.
alleys. I mean, we had alleys for years. And a big part of me would think, I can't teach my kid to ride a bike in the alley.
Right.
Why don't we have a cul-de-sac and we always have this and there's always noise. And I was still very grateful. But yeah, I was always kind of thinking, okay, when can we have the more space?
Yeah.
When can we have this? And your book came and you had almost this kind of reverse story of moving. You talk about that in the book
Yeah.
about you had the things, you had the literal white picket fence and you
Yeah.
had the big house. And then you went, like you said, you kind of compressed and you now post beautiful sunset pictures from the alley. I mean,
Yeah.
most of the pictures you post on social media have all the power lines and all the
Yeah.
things. And it really made me not only from that place of, oh, let's be grateful for what we have. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah,
And that's a
sure.
message we hear a lot. But this really showed me, hey, look at the opportunities that you have. Can you kind of talk about that and what, I guess, surprised you from? Because, like you said, you went from a place that you thought was kind of your dream life to
Yeah.
this is a little bit different. What kind of surprised you in that?
I mean, everything. Yeah. When we actually lived on a farm
Mm,
property. We had 6 acres and we ourselves are not and have never been farmers. At that time, I started a blog called Flower Patch Farm Girl. And so for years, I was kind of playing this kind of, my husband and I both grew up out in the country.
mm,
And for me, that was my full context for what the good life would be. It's to
right.
live back a long lane. It's quiet and peaceful and beautiful and it's comfortable, it feels secure, and all those things are true. And there was a lot of beauty from that time of my life. But to switch gears and to end up in many ways, like you said, I mean, living in just a sort of the opposite of that in
Mhm.
a lot of ways. I just didn't even have the ability to imagine what this was going to be like. I think one of the first things that surprised me, and I feel sort of a little silly even talking about some of this now, but I also think it's just deeply relatable. When I went from that part of my life, we had ponies in our pastures,
Yeah.
and they weren't even our ponies. A neighboring farmer asked if he could keep them in our pastures. So we had like all the delight of it and none of the work. And there were so many things that just felt like, this is bliss. And of course, this is where we want to raise our family. And we believed we were going to stay there forever. That was sort of our long-term plan. We ended up being there for 4 short little years. When we moved into the neighborhood, and it's a complicated neighborhood, and I don't shy away from talking about that because
Mhm.
I just see so much beauty in that now. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot of complexity. Initially, I had a lot of those same feelings. Like, now we have this little tiny yard. I've got these little kids. What have we done? A lot of people around us were sort of echoing, "What have you done?" And one of the first things that really caught me almost immediately was I did not leave beauty behind.
Mhm.
When we packed up our belongings and moved not very far, 20 minutes up the road, there is beauty and
Mhm.
goodness in this neighborhood every single minute of every single day. And I
Mm.
had to just kind of retrain my vision for what I think of as beauty, for what I consider beauty, for the beauty that I go looking for and seeking. One of the things that I really like to remind anyone listening is mine is not a story of it's better to live in the city any more than it's better to live out in the country or in the suburbs, or we all live in different and unique places and we all have our reasons. And so I'm not here to tell anybody that they need to sell their house and move. What I am saying is wherever we happen to be, and sometimes we get a choice in that, and sometimes we don't for a lot of different reasons. Wherever we find ourselves, this is where we are, 2 feet on the ground every single day. It is mandatory that we find a way to find it beautiful. And once we decide that that's what we're really after, it's not going to be difficult to chase that down.
That is so beautiful how you put that. And I'm going to read your words to you. So in this book, you say, when we open our lives to those from whom we used to keep a safe distance, it changes everything. Our well-being becomes mashed up with that of our neighbors, and this shifts how we think about our homes, our time, our money, and our ideas about everything from personal responsibility to success. Loving people at close range unveils all we haven't known, the stuff we've gotten wrong for a long time, or maybe forever. And I love that so much because, I mean, not only, like you said, proximity, because you can do this even if you live in the middle of nowhere, you can love people in close range, but kind of taking the idea of our social media now and our lives
Mhm.
online. What have you found has really been a game changer for you when it comes to loving people at close range in real life versus a screen or from far away?
Yeah, I see kind of both sides of this coin. I see that a lot of times it's easy to look, if we cast our vision way far out and we're looking, so I guess I'm talking about on the internet. We're
Yep.
seeing people from far away. Once we pull that vision closer and we're looking at real people in front of us on a day to day basis in our ordinary lives, those complexities kind of start to emerge. What can look simple and, we might feel this is something that I used to do in my life. I would look at a great distance at certain people, certain groups of people, and think I understood everything. Because from a safe distance, it might look kind of simple. When we come up close with people, we're forced to see the nuances. We're forced to see the details. And sometimes that can be easier and sometimes that can be harder.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see the things that we really have in common that we wouldn't have imagined. And sometimes we see the ways we may have hurt that group of people in our own lives from our own ignorance or, just not knowing what we didn't know
Mhm.
from that kind of quick urge to cast judgment when we don't have all of the facts. And so I think there's just I'm a big fan of the internet. And I know that might be a weird thing to say in 2025, but I've learned so much from having the ability to follow people whose lives have been different than mine, people
Yeah.
who have suffered in different ways, people who know things that I don't know. I've made beautiful friends and, a wonderful community of readers. And also, there is nothing that beats in real life, face to face community. I believe with my whole heart that wherever we have landed, there are people around us within arm's reach who have also landed in this place. And I think it means something to be able to say, I'm done saying I'm going to live here or there for the rest of my life. I did that once and I was wrong. So I learned something from that. But to be able to today look around me and to be able to say, I'm here and you are too, maybe there's something to that. Maybe that matters in some way. Maybe we should really rethink this idea of surrounding ourselves with people that we sort of choose, people that remind us of ourselves in certain ways, and instead start to just literally look around us and decide, I don't want to live my life from day to day to day, not knowing the people whose door I would need to knock on in the middle of the night if tragedy struck. My next door neighbors, I am not saying these have to be our best friends in the world. We don't have to go on vacations with them, although that could be very cool. But there's something really profound to getting to know them, to learning names, to being known by the people wherever, whether we're in apartments, whether we are, military family, whatever that demographic might look like, whatever that context might look like, to be able to just kind of accept our reality that we are in and choose each other. up close to listen to each other, learning to listen more than we speak was a real game changer for me.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm convinced that even if we don't quite know that that's the way we want to live, I think there's something within most of us that understands that maybe that is the safest way to move through this world, is being connected with the people who are immediately close to us.
Yes. And do you have some great stories, and I know I keep pulling this book up, and you guys were going to talk about a book Shannan has coming out in the next few months as well, and we're going to get to that. But I definitely recommend going out and grabbing this if you want that idea of, what does a community look like? And I do think you can have your online community, and then you can have your school community. It can look different in different ways in different parts of your life. But yeah, you really did open my eyes to what are my neighbors doing? What are my neighbors' names? I walk by my neighbors all the time. We share an alley. We have these. And so when we did move in the last 2 years, it really was one of my number one priorities was just know your neighbors. Wave at the people you're walking by. If you have their email, use it. Like let's use it and turn
Yep.
to each other. Do you have, because I know you have some great stories around that, but what are your thoughts? I feel like hearing you talk, we somehow think that it's got to be really hard, right? Or that we have to, okay, I need to invite everyone over to a fancy dinner and that's how I'm going to get to know them. Do you have like even small strategies that you put into place when you did move that allowed you to start to get into that space where it was more comfortable to you?
Yeah. But first of all, I have to give the caveat that I am a true and deep introvert. And it really matters to say that out loud,
Yeah.
because as an introvert myself, if I hadn't written these books and was just listening to some author who had, I would be thinking, this is not for me. This is not
Yeah.
about me. I'm an introvert. When we moved into this community, I knew no one. I knew no one in the city. I had no friends. I had rascally preschoolers. And what I realized was, though I am an introvert, we all need community.
Yeah.
That community is going to look different from people to people, and our bandwidth is going to look different, all those things. But I needed to know that I had people around me, people that I knew, people who knew me. And so there was what really changed my life and what really put me on this path was that I started walking my kids to school every day. Their school is just a couple blocks up the street here. And that feels like an entire lifetime ago, but it just put me in the literal path of my actual neighbors. And it took a lot of time and it took a lot of intention. I mean, I love that you love this book. This is the book of my heart. This is the book that details like a lot of the things that were shifting inside me. One of those things is and continues to be, this is supposed to be slow work. I am not the person to give like how to throw a fancy dinner party. I'm just not. I mean, many of my neighbors, with my husband being a jail chaplain, a lot of our closest community are people who have been incarcerated or are currently incarcerated, are rebuilding after incarceration. I have learned so much from people whose approach to life is just humble and like, take me as I am. This is who I am. All of the things in my past, all of the hope I have in the future, that started to kind of strip away some of the ideas. I would consider them, for me, toxic ideas that, my home had to be perfect and I had to, do the whole Martha Stewart thing before I could invite people into my home. What I started to see was that often, and I do love those things, and I have friends who do them very, very well. I love to be on the receiving end, but a lot of times that sort of, heightened sense of hospitality can be a barrier for people when we can just kind of accept that this is slow and challenging work. I did those walks for months that turned into years, that turned into sometimes like small little connections that every now and then bloomed into an actual friendship. And all of that counted and all of that was worth it. But we have to be willing to let it be challenging, to let it be slow, to believe that it all matters, and then to just let our guard come down and to be the one to go first and say, come on in, or let me join you in my pajamas, or whatever situation or state we might be in, or our house might be in. When we're the one who kind of goes first, it sets off this ripple effect where our neighbor, the other person, starts to think, oh, maybe we don't have to do everything perfect. Maybe we don't have to pretend to be something we're not. Maybe we can actually just live our lives together. And the other thing I would add is it's going to be a little awkward. I wrote a good bit about that, and this is my
Mhm.
third book, Start with Hello, where I lay out sort of how do you do these things. I wish I could solve awkwardness, but unfortunately, I have not solved it in myself, and I feel often like a very awkward person. I feel like I would rather, I'm the one in the grocery store that wants to kind of pretend sometimes I didn't see somebody just because I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing or it's going to be weird. I have learned through trial and error that sometimes these little interactions can be awkward, but we can survive awkwardness when what it leads to is connection. And
Mhm.
it almost always does. So we're all kind of feeling sort of awkward about these things. We all feel a little nervous about being the one to go first. We all feel kind of nervous, like, is it going to be weird if I ask this person if they want to go for a walk or if they want to come over? Like, am I putting people on the spot? Our minds go
Yep.
into overdrive with that. When we just take that step and just acknowledge, like, we are setting the bar lower. We are telling our neighbors by leading with our own awkwardness that they don't have to be anything other than who they are. I'm here to promise that really beautiful and fruitful connections come from that.
Yep. And I think too, we put so much pressure on ourselves that, okay, this needs to be my new best friendship. It doesn't, you probably don't even really have to be friends in your traditional sense of the
Yeah.
word friends. But yes, is this someone that you could reach out to if you are in the time of need? If they're in the time of need, can they reach out to you? Because they really are the closest in proximity. Like you said, you were on your walks. I mean, you're going to see people more than just about anybody else on a daily basis. Like we even this past Christmas, I made Christmas cookies with the kids. They're so excited. And we started wrapping some up. Mom, why are we wrapping those? Why are we giving some away? Like very
Yeah.
concerned. Why are we giving some away? I'm like, we're going to walk them to our neighbors' houses and we're just going to leave them on the porch with a Christmas card. Why? Because it's a kind thing to do. And they're our neighbors and they watch out over our house. And I mean, it was quite the thing for them. But
Yeah.
we walked together, we left them there, and the delight on our neighbors' faces that we had done that, but also the surprise. I mean, that's what hit me, that we don't expect that from people. And I don't know if I want to say any more in this day and age, but it's almost shocking to people when you take that extra step. But I think it doesn't have to be fancy. I mean, our cookies were not good, you guys. They were
Yeah.
not. But they had icing on them, and by all means, they were homemade. Even just those little things can
Yeah.
open a door to something. So even I don't know what, but something.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's sort of a microcosm of my life in this neighborhood. We've seen neighbors come and go. I mean, there's a lot of coming and going in this
Yeah.
neighborhood because of, its location and all these different things that sort of
Mhm.
impact why people live where they live. We've seen people pass away.
Yeah.
Two stories spring to mind based on what you just said, Jessica. That's something our family did. We did it better
Mhm.
when my kids were younger. I'd like
Yeah.
to kind of get back to some of that, but we did the same thing. Like, this is one way that we can kind of get to know people.
Mhm.
And there was one neighbor in particular. I don't know that he ever answered the door. I mean, he was sort of a neighbor that I began to see the best way I can love this neighbor is by leaving him alone. And that's okay.
Good
Like, we
point.
need to be paying attention to these cues and honoring them. But we would always leave like our little treat bag of Christmas cookies on his doorstep or by his mailbox or, that type of thing.
Mhm.
At the most, over the years, we got a wave here and there from him. And that was it. Several years later, he showed up at our door on a year that we did not do treats. He showed up with like a plastic grocery bag from Kroger with 5 oranges. And he handed them to me and said, "You've always brought stuff to me, and I wanted to bring something to you." And there were 5 people who lived in our home. And
Wow.
it was the most profound and touching moment. We did not become best friends from that point on. Every now and then I would like have extra soup. He was a single man, a little older, lived on his own. I would leave soup on his step now and then, and just random, like, leftover cottage cheese container or whatever. Like, we have to make this as easy as possible or we're not going to do it. But a few years ago, we found out he had passed away. And
Mhm.
it was one of those things where it's like, we loved him and I believe he loved us. And we didn't ever sit around a table together. We were not yucking it up in the street or the yard, but we had made that connection. And so it was really special to be able to go around to our other neighbors and let them know what had happened and to pool our money to send a bouquet of flowers to his funeral to say, we're your neighbors and we love you, and we're just sending you into the future that you now have, and we care for you. So I just think it can almost feel like these things are so small that they might not be worth our time or they're not consequential. I'm just inviting us to reconsider and to believe that maybe those Christmas treats, even if it's not reciprocated, even if we don't get a lot of positive feedback or encouragement, that we're not doing it for that reason. We're doing it to say we're here. And these are our names. Write a little card and let them know what your name is. I mean, it's these little tiny steps that build that connectedness that really help us thrive in life, especially when things feel pretty challenging.
Yep. That's a beautiful story, and it's so true. And I just sit here thinking we can definitely have community online, but it's stories like that remind me that in person, it's just so powerful. Like we can't leave behind those in-person interactions for what's online. It doesn't mean drop what's online, but just remember like that in real life can have so much power. And with that, things like we're not going to gloss over that things are really hard right now. And community feels harder than ever, I think. And I think there's so many reasons for that. I mean, the algorithm is one of them. Like it works to pit us against each other, but also there's some really big rifts that just seem to be getting wider. And you speak so well to those and you talk about that so much. I'd be curious if in the last couple years, if you have sensed that in your own like real life community, and if that has changed at all, how you kind of approach this and your idea of community.
Yeah, I would imagine that most communities have seen or felt some type of a shift. And I also know there are some communities, and even some communities, the types of communities that I've lived in the past that can be so homogenous that there are some people who might not actually be seeing this. And I think that's kind of a different sort of danger. When life in a fast moving world feels like, oh no, everything is perfect here, and the problems are out beyond us. I think that's something we have to stay on guard for. But I would say, have we seen that in our neighborhood? Our neighborhood is predominantly an immigrant neighborhood at this point. And that has been growing, over the years that we've been here. And we've sort of seen the rise and maybe in some small ways, the fall, I hope, of people literally hanging flags, on every side, we lived through our neighborhood popping up flags with different people's names on them, sometimes very derogatory flags, very hateful flags. That felt new. And that felt like we're taking division to a different level when you have neighbors literally flying competing flags. What do you do with that? Now, even as we talk about that right now, I'm seeing less of that now. So there's that. But with one neighbor in particular, and when I say neighbor, I'm not necessarily talking about my very next door neighbors, the people right here in my neighborhood and my community. There was one neighbor in particular that flew a flag that I found to be problematic. It's not what I wanted to see. And what my hope was that they could see in me, they are people who have sat around our table, people who have, we've laughed together, we've joked together, our kids have played together, that they could see in me that maybe the enemy they feared was a little more complicated than they thought. They were kind of, sort of ready for a fight in some way by putting that flag out and knowing that how we felt, but that they might pause and remember, like, wait a minute, we had dinner at their house. We had soup at their table. We had a good time together. I think there are limits to this. There are some lines that cannot be crossed, and we don't have to go into all that, but it warrants being said. I'm not making a case for just no boundaries whatsoever at all.
Yes.
But I do think when we are able to kind of lean on just these simple everyday connections, it complicates some things just enough Like it gives us just enough complexity to say, okay, maybe we don't have to hate everybody who isn't like us. Maybe there is room here. Maybe there's a little bit of, maybe it's still worth listening to each other. I think we need some of that complexity. I think we need some of that friction in our lives, because without it, it's too easy to believe that the problem is everything but us. It's too easy to start to be afraid of each other. And that's just, yeah, at the point that we're all afraid of each other. Yeah, I'm not sure where to go from there. So I think, just treating each other with simple kindness, sharing food when we can, not relenting on things that really matter and on the safety of people. I mean, that's just something that I am adamantly, it's very important to me. But when we're able in the small ways, I think it's meaningful and I think it's productive.
Yeah. And how, moving to your idea of counterweights. Well, first, I'm going to let you explain what this is, but within that question, how did that kind of come to you? I mean, was there a moment that you said, I need, in the midst of this divisiveness, in the midst of my heart breaking, I need to find something to ground my feet? How did kind of all of this come about? I love
Yeah.
that word, counterweight. You guys really
Yeah,
love it.
I wish I could trace the origin of me using that particular word. Sometimes I think I have found the start of it all, and then I find something that I wrote. I mean, I think I've been using that word for even longer than I knew. I just recently found an old Instagram post where I just kind of used that sort of, in real time as I write my Instagram captions on my phone with my thumbs, and the words just kind of flow from
Yeah.
there. But I think for me it was a word that just when I kind of stumbled upon it, it landed in exactly the right place for me. The real origin story of the concept of counterweights is my dad, actually. And when, as I mentioned, I grew up in the country. We had just like a few cows and a few pigs here and there and that type of thing. My dad he was a builder, not a farmer, but we lived kind of on this little farmette. My dad was always doing very outdoorsy, farmy types of things. And I remember from a very young age him telling me and my brother and sister, when you have to carry something heavy, and he would kind of demonstrate, like, we're heading to the airport. This is back before roller bags. Like, if you have to carry a big, heavy suitcase, you're going to have an easier time carrying it if you carry another equally heavy suitcase in the other arm. If you're carrying, bags of grain out for the cows, it's going to be easier if you carry two. And this felt sort of counterintuitive. But as I got older and as I kind of reflected on it as a writer and as a person who's very drawn to metaphor, it started to make a lot more sense that, yeah, if we're carrying one heavy thing, we're walking through life, kind of dragging ourselves. If we can find things that offset that heaviness, it keeps us upright and moving forward. And so the idea of counterweights is, what are those small, ordinary things that we can fill up this other bucket? Like, we've got this bucket over here and it is heavy. We cannot control it. We did not choose it. And it is ours to carry, period. The things in that bucket, some of them look the same. Some of them look very different. What can I put in this other bucket today to help keep me upright and moving forward? What can help me keep breathing through the chaos? And so it becomes kind of this, almost like this little treasure hunt. It becomes sort of an act of attentiveness and saying, all these things that we cannot control, what are the things that I can control today that will not erase this? It's not going to eliminate this heavy weight. It's just going to help us carry it. It's going to bring us back to ourselves so that we can keep going. And so what are counterweights? They are whatever you need them to be. They are personal. For me, they're often kind of weird and unexpected. They're very ordinary, but I'm finding this practice of paying attention to these small things. You and I spoke before we started recording about our mugs that we drank. I'm a tea drinker. We are drinking, very oddly, we are drinking our morning tea out of the same mug with a different initial on it, but that's kind of cool. But for me, choosing my mug, these are my mugs, by the way. Those are all my mugs, most of them from a thrift store. Looking at that rack in my kitchen every morning and choosing which mug speaks to me today. Not everybody works that way. My husband does not care. But for me, it is a moment of agency, and it's a moment of kind of honoring myself and honoring my mood and honoring that I get a choice. I get a say in these small things. And so through the day, I'm putting those little counterweights in that bucket, and I just keep going. I keep going.
Yep. And that has been so, I want to say comforting. It just has, for me, like personally helped in that. I know a lot of people are talking about the word glimmer is popular right now, where you look and you find a glimmer during the day, that glimmer of hope. And I completely understand it. But there was something that didn't quite resonate with me about that. I think only because I was thinking, okay, but also this other stuff is still really hard. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't put that down. I want to, but I see the news. I see how it's affecting my kids. I see how it's affecting my neighbors and marginalized groups. Like I see this
Yes.
and I don't know how to have both. And so the idea of counterweights was just so, yeah, I can carry both.
Yeah.
And I really need to so that I can keep serving in the way I want to serve and even be the mom I want to be and try to
Mhm.
move things forward. I can carry both. So that idea and I mean it was put into place last week. Most of at least at the time this is being recorded, I had talked about this, but we live right outside Evergreen, Colorado. Our neighbors and community were a part of the school shooting that happened here. My son was in lockdown that day. And I was on my favorite trail run that day to see the baby buffalo because we
Mm.
have baby buffalo and I've been posting about them for months. And I think they are my ultimate counterweight right now. That are they doing anything to help society? Probably not. But are they lightening my load a little bit and allowing me to, like you said, put one foot in front of the other during times like that? They
Yeah.
are. And to learn not to apologize for that. And like you said, it can be weird and it can be individual. Maybe it's that you're watching Love is Blind and it's just your favorite thing
Totally.
right now. I mean,
100%. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I think counterweights keep us soft in a hard, hard world. They keep us fully human. I think it's, for me, what really started to make sense to me, I think I've been talking about counterweights for, like I said, for a long time
Mhm.
before I realized, like, I just want to keep talking about this. And I probably want to write a book about this because it became mandatory in my actual life, in my everyday life, to be able to say, not just like, let's make a gratitude list, right? Like that's been popular for a long time. This isn't about sort of naming our blessings. This is about countering our weights. And so if we're going to take up this practice of counterweights, it requires us to name the weights. We
Mhm.
have to weigh this
Mhm.
heaviness over here if we want to counterweight it. And
Mhm.
so the whole practice of counterweights pulls us away from this idea of just, focus on joy or sort of this detached kind of pulling our head under the covers or into the sand or whatever. It requires us to be very honest about what is happening around us, what is happening in our bodies, and to be able to also say, this is really difficult and I have to find a way through. And there is no tiny buffalo that is going to change the terror
Mhm.
that you and your community suffered. And at the same time, we must get better at carrying two things at the same time. We must get better at reminding ourselves that even on our very worst days, we do still see beauty and we might even smile on our worst days. And that is not a bad thing. That is a human thing. So to be able to remind ourselves and give us the grace of like, we are more than one feeling. Thank God. We are more than one opinion. Thank God. I mean, we get to carry a lot. And I think, as a person that comes from a faith tradition,
Mhm.
a person that was raised hearing about, the abundant life that we were promised, I think true abundance does not mean we just get all these things we think we want or all the good things, air quotes. True abundance means we get it all. We get it all. And we have to find a way to carry it. And
Yeah.
that's what I hope this does for people. It's like we've got all this over here swirling and we have these things over here that we can hold on to. I mean, a lot of my counterweights come from nature.
Yeah.
I am currently on a months long with big pauses in the middle. We have swallowtail caterpillars in my little city garden by the alley. And right now, I mean, they've come and gone and come and gone, but right now I have 8
Wow.
swallowtail caterpillars on my parsley. And I'm obsessed. It's like my version of the tiny buffalo. Like I'm going out every day and like counting them, make sure they're all there, taking pictures to see, oh my gosh, they're getting bigger. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, how much bigger can they get? I hope I eventually see the swallowtail butterflies that they become. But for me, I mean, that's everything. It's everything to be able to take a pause, to take a breath and just be in my body and be in nature and see something so small but so meaningful happening right in front of my face, and I get to be a little part of it.
Yep. And as you say this, I'm thinking, so what has actually come from you doing this and posting online and me seeing your counterweights? It allows me, well, one, it reminds me I need to find that myself today. But two, it gives me permission to do that. I think
Yep.
sometimes in the hard and wanting to recognize other people in the hard, we forget that we have permission to also find joy. And you doing it gives me permission to do it, which then builds community and goes right back to kind of what we were saying, that because I think about that when I post, I'll post things and I'll bring up the baby buffalo. And this has
Mhm.
been like 6 months since they were born, and people have watched them grow, and people who wouldn't necessarily think that we would all be in the same community, we suddenly are. Like, we're suddenly brought
Yep.
together by
Yep.
the caterpillars, by the sunset, by the baby buffalo, by a workout we're doing together, whatever it is. I think community can look very different, and allowing ourselves to feel both, that I can look at you and say, you know what, I know you're carrying both, and that helps me feel stronger and also feel more connected to you because I'm carrying both also.
Yeah. One of the essays I wrote in the Counterweights book
Mhm.
is about the idea that grief is the counterweight to loss. So
Hmm.
there's another aspect for me. It's not even just like I'm asking myself every day, moment by moment. Some days are easier, some days are more difficult. I say out loud to myself sometimes, what are my counterweights? Sometimes anger can be the counterweight.
Hmm.
Sometimes grief is the counterweight. I mean, there are things that are so painful and so disorienting. All we can do is, like you said, Jessica, give ourselves permission. This is how I'm feeling. And I can try to pretend like I'm fine, but I know I'm not fine. And so, what I need today is to find small ways to give, permission or voice to that grief, to that sorrow, to that confusion, to find a way to honor it and to name that all these emotions that we feel, these things are sacred,
Yeah.
that we don't have to just dismiss them or ignore them or pretend that they don't exist. Sometimes that is the counterweight. And so this isn't, it's really not about, like you mentioned, I am surrounded by people who are at the margins for different reasons. I am surrounded by people living in economic poverty. This cannot be about being bougie. And I like bougie things now and then. And I mean, I think most of us do. Counterweights is not about that. It's, more often than not, it's not even about spending money at all or accessing privilege in different ways. It's about these little things that bring us back to ourselves, finding little pockets. I'm somebody, yesterday I was having a real hard day and I had a few free hours and I drove to the beach an hour away. That was my counterweight. And I say that knowing there was a time in my life that could have never ever happened. And I say that knowing that there are so many people who, for a million different reasons, that would never be able to
Mhm.
happen. And so it's important to acknowledge that, like, these things we've got to find, we just have to find something that does work in
Yeah.
the season and in the moment we're in. But I will also say there was part of me that felt like this is crazy to just go to the beach for 3 hours. Like, this is frivolous. This is,
Mhm.
the world just feels like it's kind of falling apart around me. I had to actively give myself that permission to just make that drive and sit in my chair on the beach and read my book and be far away from my phone. And that's what I needed. And so look for, sometimes it's going to be a little 15-minute pocket of rest. And sometimes it might be a 3 hour plop down in the sand at the beach. But asking yourself throughout the day, what do I need? And then looking around, like, what is within reach right now? What is going to spark joy, to bring me some delight, to give me some comfort,
Yep.
to give me a sense of security and safety. Sometimes it's just like, what pajamas do I want to wear tonight?
100%.
What do I feel coziest in? Can I go to bed a little earlier? Can I watch Love is Blind? Can I make time for this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is something that we can put into practice like you said, immediately. I mean,
Yep.
put on your favorite song or just go out,
Yes.
look outside, look at the birds in the air above your head, and then let yourself take that as a counterweight. I think that's the other
Yep.
piece, is give yourself the permission to have that moment,
Yes.
knowing it's going to serve
Mhm.
you moving forward. Like you said, it's not frivolous. It is the
Mhm.
ultimate act of self-care, which we all need if we're going to keep going through this together, which is
Yeah.
our only way out, right? Is just to keep
Yeah.
going forward.
These things are always happening, even if we're not fully aware of them. But when we can start to pay attention to it, become aware, when we are weighing those positive things, it gives it weight.
Yeah.
It's like even if we've never heard of the counterweights practice, we know that there are still positive things happening around us. When
Mhm.
we can pull in some agency in that, some permission, the reminder that we have a say in some little things and put those practices into place throughout our days and throughout our lives, it kind of it makes that bucket a little heavier, that good bucket,
Yeah.
right? Because now not only are these things just kind of randomly happening around us, now we are noticing when they happen. And now we are seeking them and saying, what I need tonight is like a hot cup of ginger tea.
Mhm.
That will help me to feel a little calmer. And then we make that tea and we are caring for ourselves. And that is profound.
100%. And it doesn't have to be fancy, like you said. It just has to be intentional. So, you guys, Counterweights, an essential practice for holding hope in a heavy world, is coming out in spring, right? Spring
March. Yep.
2026.
March of 2026.
You can pre-order your copy now. So I am going to have links below, and I will have links to your other books as well. And tell everybody where else they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Substack. That's where I do the bulk of my writing. I write something every week. And my Substack is called The Soup, but you can just Google Shannan Martin Substack and it'll pull right up. It's a beautiful, supportive, thoughtful community there. I'd love for you to join us. And you can also find me on Instagram and Threads. And my handle is at Shannan Writes. It's SHANNAN. And because my parents decided to be real creative, I get to spend my life
Yep.
explaining that. But do find me on Instagram. I'm there quite a bit as well. And I'm talking a lot about naming our weights and naming our counterweights and, just having a good time there.
You are. I mean, you are one of those accounts that when I am scrolling, I will stop. I always know this is something I need to see. This is something I need to read. So if you guys want encouragement, if you want to learn more about everything we've talked about, definitely go find Shannan online, get one of her books. I am eternally grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. I would love it if you could take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It means a lot to us and it helps our content get out to more women who need it. You can find more of my resources at my website, jessicavallant.com, or find me on YouTube at Jessica Vallant and Instagram at Jessica S. Vallant.